Today on Inside Utah Politics, the state of the state. Governor Gary Herbert says economically it's never been better. He's here to break down his 11th and final State of the State address as the head of our state. And health officials say more Utah teens than ever before are addicted to nicotine because of vaping. How a former addict is using her story to push for change to state laws.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Good Sunday morning. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics, and we begin this morning with Utah Governor Gary Herbert. Governor, as always, great to have you on the show. Thanks for making time for us.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Always happy to be with you, Glenn.
Glad to have you as well. Let's start off, well, we're going to talk mostly about your State of the State address, your 11th and final. As you delivered that, did you ever pause? Was there any surreal moments where you thought, wow, 11 times, and here we are with the final one?
Actually 16 times if you count the 5 times as lieutenant governor. So it's been a common thing for us to go through every year. And as it's my last time to do that, it was a little bit bittersweet. There's a new chapter of life ahead of us, but we still have a year to go to finish up this term. And a lot of good friends and a lot of good memories, and we've accomplished a lot of good things. Not without challenge, not without a few stumbles here and there, but kind of a bittersweet moment for me.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be. You gave a nod to the people of Utah, saying we wouldn't be where we are today without the good people of Utah. Talk a little bit about that, and why was that an important part of your message?
I think we sometimes forget what a great state we live in, mainly because we have such wonderful people. They are very charitable. They do care about their neighbors. They volunteer. We're #1 in all those categories nationally. People really are engaged in trying to make things better for others outside of their own family. So we've had great success. We are very similar in our values in this state. The homogeneity is unique to Utah compared to other states. And really the secret sauce we have for our success is the people of Utah. And because they are good people, they create people that represent their views that they elect. Those people then create policy that reflects the views and the policy and principles and values of the electorate, and consequently we're having great outcomes. It really is a combination of good people, which is the foundation that elect good people to be their leaders.
I would add to that a very welcoming state. That's something else you address, the modern day pioneer. Talk about that and why that was important for you to not only talk about, but to acknowledge those in the crowd.
We've become a little bit too harsh when it comes to some of the issues surrounding refugees in particular, immigration in general. There's certainly a right way and a wrong way to do these things, but we need to be a little bit more, I think, compassionate. We are a state that was founded by refugees. We probably understand this better than most. And so I think we need to set the tone, and we have been a leader in this area, which other states, after we've made statements, have kind of followed us in that direction. And so, again, I think we have a lot of people that are, the diversification of Utah is happening. They're a major part of our fabric today, and they are contributing in very positive ways. And so we ought to thank them and welcome them, and we did that last night.
The latest statement you made to the president, you said, we want to continue welcoming refugees. Did you ever hear any follow-up from him on that?
I've not, although I'll be meeting with him here in a couple of weeks back in Washington, D.C., and so I'll have the opportunity to have that discussion. What we were saying in essence was, regardless of what other states say, because he was trying to give states more flexibility, more of the decision-making capability, which I understand that's not a bad thing, but we as a state are willing to do our fair share. Refugees are running away from terror. They're trying to find a safe haven, and the closer to home they can find it, the better. But these people that come to America have been vetted for nearly 2 years, maybe longer. And so when they come to Utah, they are vetted again, so we get 2 bites of the apple, and they engage. We have about 75,000 refugees that are part of our fabric and doing good things, contributing to society. We have the opportunity to take at least our fair share of the growing people out there, and the America ought to do that also.
You said that excellent would be a gross understatement in defining our economic situation at this time. Talk a little bit about that and how you've seen that evolve over your decade in office.
Well, it's always hard to give a grade. You know, how do you say how good we are? In school we give A's, B's, C's, But for those who are exceptional, maybe even beyond, we say A+. And that's really where Utah's at right now. We're not just exceptional. We are more than exceptional. We are thriving. We are doing great things beyond what we probably imagined 10 years ago. It's not just that we're number one, but number two is really distant. They're not even in our rear view mirror anymore. So we ought to be not prideful about it. We should be humble about what we're doing, but understand what got us there and maintain and continue what we're doing. It comes from many different areas. We've got good policies in place, good people, but we have efficiency in state government. Our government is more efficient than it's ever been. We actually have fewer employees running state government today than we did 19 years ago. I mean, think about it. Government is a monopoly. Government doesn't make anything. We provide services. We have labor intensive is what we do. And yet we've shrunk the number of laborers so that we've gone, in my watch, just on my time, it's gone from one state employee in 122 residents of Utah to now it's 1 in 155. And what that means, we're saving about $400 million every year ongoing in accumulation. It's really billions of dollars that we've saved the people by not keeping up with inflation and reducing our laborers.
You mentioned this in your speech as well. Even though we are doing well economically, there are some, not all, that are benefiting from that necessarily. Affordable housing, a really huge issue. I look at my children and I wonder, how are they going to afford to live in the state of Utah? That's a big concern for myself and parents. I'm sure you look at the same thing with your grandchildren.
Exactly, and real estate, which is my background, I understand the cycles it kind of goes through, and we're in an upcycle now. And we need to get together. I've talked to the League of Cities and Towns, the Association of Counties, our local government, the zoning ordinances, our building codes need to be looked at. Can we in fact have higher density and still not sacrifice quality? Smallness doesn't have to be, you know, not adequate. We can make smaller homes that probably are very comfortable. I just came from a seminar in California where they talked about villages being created for homeless people, and really small homes, but very attractive and very functional. So there's probably ways that we can in fact increase the affordability. Sometimes the fees that we charge, impact fees, are higher. We're getting more like California. That's a concern for me. Density zoning, building codes, all those need to be looked at to see if we can find a more affordable way to provide housing.
Sticking with the California theme here, you also brought up California gridlock and not wanting to get Utah in that same place down the road. I visit California and I'm always happy to come back to the state of Utah after, you know, getting stuck on the interstate there and whatnot. We're looking at 5.8 million people here in the state of Utah by 2065. How do you keep that from happening?
Well, you need to plan ahead. Clearly what we're doing with Envision Utah, with our Quality Growth Commission, is trying to anticipate the growth. It's going to happen whether we like it or not. Some of it's internal growth. Although our birth rate has slowed down some, we still are having babies, so there's going to be internal growth. And people are wanting to come here because of the great quality of life. They like living with the people of Utah. They're great neighbors. They're optimistic, hopeful, friendly, and there are job opportunities. So growth is going to happen. We need to find ways to accommodate it, anticipate it, and have no diminution of our quality of life. We are on track to do that. We did the largest grassroots survey in the history of America with our Your Utah, Your Future survey. 60,000 people nearly participated and give us a blueprint of what they would like to see, the people of Utah would like to see in their future. We're going to try to follow that blueprint and anticipate the growth and accommodate the growth. You
talked about the need for sound tax policy still moving forward. We already know the tax reform bill was repealed. You've already signed it. That's a done deal. In your next year, do you see addressing that at all, or is this something the next governor is going to be taking up?
As I've said before, it's probably time to not only push the reset button, but the pause button. I think right now we're in a place where we need to take a deep breath, count 10, step back, take a fresh look. I think the challenges of having optimal tax policy are still there. They have not been resolved. You know, we need to get input from the public to say, well, what would you like us to do? What do you think would be the right thing to do? Because every economist, CPAs, people who are tax policy experts, all are saying you're going to have to bend the curve some way. You can't just keep kicking this can down the road.
You spent a better part of last year doing that, though. How much more time can you spend getting public input and coming up with a plan that everyone can come together on?
Well, obviously we didn't do enough, and we didn't do it well enough. We didn't explain ourselves well enough, and maybe not got enough input. There may be parts of it that are salvageable, some parts that are not. We need to have that ongoing discussion. It's not going to go away. We can't solve it probably this year at all. I think it would be foolish to try. But in subsequent years, again, a new governor will maybe have some fresh ideas and perspective, maybe a new opportunity. I think the public needs to have this digest and understand, what are the ramifications of tax policy, what's good about what we have, what do we need to change in the future. We all have an opportunity to listen and learn from each other. I talked about better communication, but I emphasized better dialogue. That's a two-way communication. We can't be just explaining all the time. We need to listen and dialogue back and forth so that we listen, hear, and understand. All
right, we're going to have to end it on that note. We'll catch up with you again at the end of the session to see how things wrap up in your final session.
Well, I can hardly wait. It's going to be great. It's going to be the best year ever, 2020.
All right,
great vision.
You heard it right there. Thanks so much for your time. Still to come, the legislature will also be addressing medical cannabis during the session. We're going to take a look at some of the modifications up for consideration. But first, it's a dilemma parents across the country are dealing with, having to choose between family and career. The latest on efforts to create national family leave benefits after the break. Health officials say teen vaping is an epidemic in our state, and it's expected to only get worse if it goes unchecked. One former addict is hoping her story will help as lawmakers highlight their plan to address it. Youth vaping rates are skyrocketing in Utah. Katie Bertram knows that all too well.
A lot of my friends were doing it, and everybody around me was doing it, and they were sharing it with me, so I decided maybe it's something that I wanted to try and get into.
She started just last year as a 19-year-old. She says the flavors made it easy, first mango and then mint. It didn't take long for addiction to kick in, and she was vaping at every opportunity.
I started to notice the effects of it, the breathlessness, the chest pain, and I got nervous that, I wasn't going to be able to have the things in my life that I love to do.
According to the American Heart Association, nearly 38,000 middle and high school students in our state are vaping. They say that means more Utah kids are struggling with the nicotine addiction than ever before. These products were all confiscated from Harriman High School.
And it's happening in the back of the classroom. It's happening in the bathrooms, it's happening in their cars, it's happening everywhere that we can find it.
State lawmakers say they are taking a holistic approach this year, introducing a number of bills to address the issue. They would do things like create a no-tolerance policy for selling nicotine products to children, a new tax to hire officers to focus on violations, require e-cigarettes to be moved to age-restricted areas of stores, and create an education program to discourage youth from using the products.
These are marketed to youth like me.
Bertram is backing those ideas and others this legislative session because she knows the grip vaping can have. She says it was a long fight, but she gave it up after about 8 months. She says her mother played a big role in helping her get to this point and has a message for other parents.
It really pays off to be supportive, and it pays off to be understanding, so that you don't chase them away from, talking to you about these things.
She also hopes other teens can learn from her story.
I'm happy with the choice I made, and I would never look back on that choice.
Bertram wants to be a voice in favor of vaping legislation this year up on Capitol Hill. She plans to testify during public hearings. Lawmakers say they don't want moms and dads to have to choose between having a family and having a career. A House committee is looking at several legislative proposals that would close the gaps in paid parental leave for federal workers and create a national paid family leave benefit. Washington correspondent Anna Warnicki has the latest.
Missouri Republican Congresswoman Ann Wagner says as a mom and a grandma, she knows the joy and stress a newborn can be on parents.
Along with rent and groceries, parents are now paying for medical bills, diapers, car seats.
Wagner told her colleagues in the House Ways and Means Committee that working parents need to be able to raise their child without the fear of losing their career.
The last thing a new parent should have to worry about is whether one is going to lose a job or miss a paycheck.
Wagner says under the current Family and Medical Leave Act, workers have the option to take time off but choose not to because they can't afford it. Wagner says her bill, the New Parents Act, would give parents the option to use a portion of their Social Security after the birth or adoption of a child.
I think it could really be called punished leave, because it does punish working Americans for using paid leave by cutting Social Security.
Texas Democratic Congressman Lloyd Doggett says instead, Congress should consider the Democrats' Family Act. It would raise taxes to make sure every worker has access to 12 weeks of paid leave.
I believe it will provide the compensation we need.
But Texas Republican Kevin Brady says raising taxes would hurt families.
Americans deserve a paid family leave plan that helps families and small businesses, not a one-size-fits-all Washington mandate.
He says the federal government should get out of the way and let employers and employees work together to create a solution that works for them. In Washington, I'm Anna Warnicki.
Utah Senator Mitt Romney also behind the New Parents Act. Senator Mike Lee has a bill that would also allow parents to dip into Social Security early to pay for leave after the birth or adoption of a child. Still to come, the state legislature considering hundreds of issues this legislative session, including scholarships for special needs students. More on that after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
We turn back to the legislative session now with a look at some of the bills up for consideration this year. Connor Boyack is the president of the Libertas Institute. He's here to dig into some of the top legislative priorities for his organization. Connor, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's start with medical cannabis. This has been something you guys have been working on for years now. Of course, we all know we passed the new law, but now some modifications. Let's get into those. It's a big bill, let's get into some of the bigger things. First off, the getting rid of the blister pack requirement.
So what's a blister pack? I mean, it's a weird word, but the way we negotiated Prop 2 at the end when a lot of opposition was trying to kill it, one of the points of contention was the raw cannabis flower. Can patients have access to it? It's much cheaper, and a lot of people, especially with the THC vaping issue, that was actually another vitamin E acetate, something in the cannabis. So a lot of patients just want the raw flower, keep it clean, keep it natural. But some of the opposition didn't want that. So we came up with this idea of putting in these blister packs, kind of like your allergy medication or some types of chewing gum. But that's expensive, it's awkward, no other state does it, and so one of the big changes in this year's bill is we're completely going away from that and moving more towards the industry standard of just jars, containers, and stuff like that.
Talk about some of the problems you faced with that, because I know there was some confusion about not only what it meant and how much could be in it, that sort of thing. What type of problems have you seen with the blister pack requirement specifically?
Well, one of the biggest problems we're going to face is the actual cost of medicine, because the black market is always there. It's always been there. And if the cost of medical cannabis is too much higher, patients are just going to keep using it illegally. They're not going to benefit from the legal protections. They're going to put themselves, their jobs, their children at risk. And so if the costs are really high, it becomes a barrier. And blister packs was one of the things that added to that cost, because it was going to be an entirely new and novel thing that Utah had to figure out and require. And so we just wanted to try and do away with the cost, in this case with the blister pack requirement, and trying to find ways to reduce that price so that patients feel more incentives to come into the program.
Another issue you're looking at is expungement for patients.
Yeah.
Talk about what you're trying to accomplish with that part of the bill?
So expungements are the ability to basically wipe from your criminal record a past offense that you've committed. Now that the state, the legislature, the voters have said yes to medical cannabis, we can look back and say, well, yes, patients before Prop 2 violated the law. They knew what they were doing. There was an amount of risk there, but they're patients. They had cancer. They had epilepsy. Can we turn backward before Prop 2 with a little bit of compassion and say, if you can establish that you had those conditions and your doctor was supportive, let's get that off your criminal record since we've made that decision going forward.
What kind of pushback are you facing there, though? Is there a concern that, hey, look, back then this was the law, so why should we go back and expunge those records?
It's a fair point, but not really. I mean, first of all, these are early discussions, right? We've only had 1 week of the legislative session already, so we have a lot more conversations to have.
Sure.
But in terms of the stakeholders that we've been meeting around the table on these issues, there's a recognition that there's a new perspective on cannabis that didn't exist even just a year ago, let alone many years ago. And so I don't know how far back the expungement is going to be. I don't think we're going 20 years back.
Sure.
But I think there is an opportunity to try and do right by some of those patients that have been waiting for years.
There was an issue with this right after Prop 2 was approved, though, as well. Patients were still being pulled over and charged with crimes. Has that panned out? Are we starting to see that level out? Or is there a need for expungement in some of those cases as well?
Yes, and it's improved. We have had some struggles, and it's taken law enforcement and prosecutors and judges a little bit of time to warm up to the law, to read what the law. It's very frustrating to say, yay, we changed the law, and then the government continues to not enforce the law and not abide by the law. So it's been a bit of a learning curve for everyone. We've tried to be patient with all of the law enforcement. We're getting a lot better. But yes, I think expungement would include those people as well.
Okay, let's move on to another issue. When I first saw this that you guys were working on, I thought that's kind of different to see you guys work on something like this, but it makes sense in the sense of more choice for parents, and this is for special needs students and their parents. You guys would like to have different options for them to be able to take advantage of if they so choose.
So I really liked in the governor's State of the State address this week, he quoted Utah's Teacher of the Year saying that we need innovation in the education system so that the needs of every individual child is met. We completely agree with that. The problem with the current public education system is there's not a lot of flexibility, especially for those with special needs. You can get an individualized education program set up for your child, but even then there's often not the right resources or not enough. This would be a scholarship where in lieu of going to the public school and getting the services that they give you there, your special needs child could go to a private school, could get tutors, therapists, basically get pulled out of public school, and a lot of those dollars that are being spent on that child in public school would be unlocked and follow the child so that the parent could help provide for their kid the specific individualized services that they particularly need to help them improve and get over whatever challenges they have. Maybe they go back into public education after working those things through, but this is really a design to try and meet the individual needs of those kids with special needs.
And the idea there is that public school doesn't work for all special needs students.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair argument. It's not meant to criticize the system, but you can't really have this big system that has the ability to adapt to all these individual needs. Parents know their children best. This isn't a very broad system. It's very narrow, but it's meant to help those who have the most needs among us.
All right. You just mentioned innovation in education. You guys are looking at innovation in business as well, cutting back regulation. What would you like to see done there?
So we're a free market organization to our core. That's kind of our bread and butter. And every single year in Utah, we've had a free market fight. Think of Tesla, the food trucks, Airbnb, Uber and Lyft. Every year, these new innovative companies come out, and then the government shuts them down and comes after them. Last year, it was Turo. Imagine people flying into Salt Lake City, going to the curbside, and then an officer is standing there with a ticket because you were trying to share a car with this guy that, as it turns out, oh, Salt Lake City criminalized. Rather than reacting every year to these fights and then trying to reactively fix the law, what we're looking at this year is an opportunity for certain industries to be able to flip that narrative. Rather than being reactive, let's be proactive, where if a company comes into a problem, their business model doesn't quite fit the regulations, their service, their product, we can hit the pause button and say, rather than continue to criminalize that, as long as it's safe, as long as no one's being harmed or no one's at jeopardy, let's put a pause button on that enforcement and give a couple years to let the law catch up.
We have about a minute left. Let's get to eminent domain, another thing you guys are working on. You want to limit the government's ability to take personal property.
Yeah, fairly simple. The balance is a bit out of whack, and the government right now can take a lot of people's property, and you really don't have legs in court to challenge the government. What we're looking to do is set up a rubric so that a property owner can get into court and the judge would have to check the boxes to make sure that the city is allowed to take the property. So really we're just trying to let people who want to fight and challenge an eminent domain taking, they have the ability to do so, whereas right now they really don't.
All right, those issues and many more you guys are keeping your eye on. We appreciate your time here, and we'll be following those as they go along in the session.
Thanks, Glenn.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. The legislative session runs through Thursday, March 12th. The presidential primary for Utah is Super Tuesday, that's March 3rd. State conventions for both Utah Republicans and Democrats are set for Saturday, April 25th, and the primary election is Tuesday, June 30th. Make sure to connect with me on social media. I'd like to know what you think of this show and other issues that are important to you. You can email me at InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com, or you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Just log on and search Glenn Mills, ABC4. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.